based on a bad officiating decision. If I can take you into that locker room, I felt like we hit the proverbial playoff wall year after year. 13 seconds, missed field goals, the catch. So I just sensed in that locker room, like, where do we go from here? I want to take you in the locker room after that game. I looked around. First thing I noticed was our quarterback with his head down, crying. I looked at all the other players. I looked at their faces and our coaches. I walked over to Josh. He didn't even acknowledge I was there. First thing I said to him, I said, "That was a catch." We all know what I'm talking about. He didn't acknowledge me. He just sat there sobbing. He was listless. He had given everything he had to try to win that game. And looking around, so did all the other players on the team. I saw the pain in Josh's face at his presser, and I felt his pain. I know we can do better, and I know we will get better.
I mean, wow, is really the only way you can react to a lot of this. There's more coming, by the way, as we welcome you to the show. We got Field and Dan here, Jeff Darlington with us as well. Dan, I'll start with you. Does Piola's reason for firing McDermott that he just outlined there make sense to you?
There were moments in the press conference that I want to say yes, but I do think there's a lot of the moments where I walk away and say that was a disaster. A disaster. I think, one, Sean McDermott deserved better. I think, two, it sounded, and Mr. Pegula said this, that like they lost the game and that's what made the decision. And he kind of throughout the press conference pointed to other moments, but like we're holding hostage the future of the football team on a play because they lose the game on a play. Whatever play you want to point to, that being the reason they lose the game. And so it's a disastrous situation when the owner implies for a moment that they decided to fire the head coach, a great one, because they lost that game rather than the culmination. And again, I think he goes into that over the course of the press conference, the culmination of years on years on years. I think that's justified. But to sit there at one point and say, well, because we lost that game, whew, that's a lot. That's heavy.
Yeah, tough day all the way around for the Bills organization. I think, you say embarrassing at times?
Yeah, disastrous.
Disastrous at times.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair way of categorizing it. I think the way that this press conference should have unfolded is as follows. The Bills should have gone up there. I think it should have been just Brandon Beane, by the way, the general manager. And I think he should have gone up there. I think he should have said, we thank Sean McDermott for his immense and incredible contributions. He was an outstanding head coach for a very long time in Buffalo. I have a difficult decision to make. I made it. We are hopeful that we can achieve our ultimate goal of winning the Super Bowl going forward with the new head coach. We understand there's work to do, not just to find a head coach, but also to find some reinforcements from this roster to take it to the next level. And instead, this was a disaster. It felt like Terry Pegula made this it's not Brandon Beane's fault. It is instead the Sean McDermott fault. And I just feel like Sean McDermott, who for all of the years, listen, was he perfect? No head coach is.
Became a scapegoat in this, though.
The guy who's had a ton of success and is universally respected around the NFL. I can't think of a moment, and perhaps I've just forgotten one today, where Sean McDermott did something to harm the image of the Buffalo Bills publicly. And the city of Buffalo, the fans of Buffalo, I think by all accounts, Sean McDermott was a guy who did ride for Buffalo throughout the entirety of his tenure. This is a tough decision. There's no two ways about it. But it could have been handled with so much more grace.
In class.
You're kind of kicking a guy out. Would you've already done by firing him? Now you're kicking him once he has already been moved out the door. I thought it was just a real fumble in a lot of ways by the Bills today.
Field, I think the way you're outlining it is that there's one of two strategies the team could have taken when they approach this. They could be emotional or they could be strategic. What you suggested was much more strategic. It felt like they were preying instead on the emotions of a fan base to try to justify this decision. the reason this matters is not because whether they passed or failed the press conference. The reason any of this matters is how does this set into motion their actions moving forward? Will they make an emotional hire that seems to just be a pendulum swing that is the best way to possibly placate a fan base that desperately wants a Super Bowl? Or will they be as strategic as possible? I've talked to a number of the candidates that are up for this job right now, and I actually made a joke to one of them and said, hey, go watch the press conference, and when you go into your interview, just agree with everything that Terry Pegula said. Like, just go in there and be like, yeah, and that line you said here was great because it felt too emotional. And I think that there maybe needs to be a little bit more strategy. And I do think Brandon Beane is smart enough, especially since he'll be heading that search. I think that will be the case. But what we saw from the owner certainly suggests that he's far more emotional in this moment.
Yeah, and I would say two things because I think we all loved Baltimore's owner, Steve Bisciotti, and his candidness and truthfulness and openness and their press conference. Yeah. So there's part of me that does enjoy the reality of Mr. Pegula talking about 13 seconds and the missed field goal and all that. So I can appreciate the honesty and him saying, I felt like we hit the playoff wall and I was in the locker room. So I do appreciate that. Yeah. And I agree with the class. There's a different way to describe it. But then also when you say, well, part of this was when I walk into the locker room and I see our quarterback crying. Now I feel Josh is going to have to carry a little bit of guilt of, well, if I didn't cry, then is McDermott fired? Or when he talks about the other players and the emotion that they have, do now the other players have to carry a little bit of the guilt of, well, if we had just walked in and handled ourselves differently in the locker room, maybe Coach McDermott would still be here? I just think, again, the messaging was a miss.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, nobody faults those guys for the way that they responded to losing a heartbreaker of a game and knowing the chance that they had potentially get to the Super Bowl in this particular group of teams. I mean, there's just so many things, right? The what ifs could go on, but this is where I think it got a little hairy. There's more. A reporter was in the middle of asking Brandon Beane about drafting Keon Coleman when Pegula jumped in. Listen to this.
Yeah, can I interrupt? I'll address the Keon situation. The coaching staff pushed to draft Keon. I'm not saying Brandon wouldn't have drafted him, but he wasn't his next choice. That was Brandon being a team player and taking advice of his coaching staff who felt strongly about the player. Taking, for some reason, heat over it and not saying a word about it, but I'm here to tell you the true story.
No, he was my pick. I made the pick. Terry's point was that we might have had it in a different order of personnel versus coaching, and I went that way. But ultimately, I'm not turning a pick for a player that I don't think we can succeed with. So don't misunderstand that.
I mean, guys, just in case anybody isn't clear on this, Keon Coleman is still on the team for now. So this
He's got a touchdown Sunday.
Yeah, this is wild to me. Field, what do you make of all this on Coleman?
This was where it kicked into overdrive because this is when it became the blame game, right? Hey, the coaching is the reason why we have not reached the heights that we think we should have reached by this point already. And one of the biggest roster flaws right now for Buffalo is, of course, the lack of a difference-making wide receiver. Well, the biggest investment they've made in the draft recently is Keon Coleman. And not only did Terry Pegula sort of once again kind of kick Sean McDermott and the entire coaching staff when they were already down, but he put his GM in a really bad spot there, right? It makes Brandon Beane all of a sudden, it sort of undercuts him a little bit.
He's like, no, it was actually me.
Yeah, and Brandon, I thought, did a nice save. And I thought that Brandon Beane today handled some different.